Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to No Summary, Golden Threads online conversations with artists who don't fit in a box. For those of you who don't know, Golden Thread is the first theater company in the United States devoted to the Middle East, founded by playwright and director Tarangi Yehia, in 1996. My name is Omar Zahzah, and I'm an assistant professor of Arab and Muslim ethnicities and diaspora studies, or Ahmed studies, in the Department of Race and Resistance Studies at San Francisco State University. And while my current position is within San Francisco State's Historic College of Ethnic Studies, my training is in comparative literature, and the seeds of what will be our conversation today arose out of a collaboration around my Arabic and Arab American literature course, in which we're studying both Ghassan Kanafani's story Returning to Haifa and this theatrical adaptation, co-written by Ismail Khalidi and Naomi Wallace and staged by Productions with Samer Al-Saber directing, and more on this in a second. First, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the converging realities of settler colonialism and genocide that mark our larger moment, as well as this current convening. Golden Thread Productions acknowledges that the land we occupy is the home of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, known colonially today as San Francisco. As we recognize the ancestral stewards of this land and acknowledge that our presence here is a reminder of unjust histories and ongoing presence of colonization and dispossession, we are outraged by the US administration's complicity in perpetuating and willfully abetting the Zionist settler colonial dispossession, oppression, land theft, and genocide of Palestinians in Palestine. Golden Thread Productions is dedicating its entire season to Palestine because we believe it's our duty as artists and culture makers to speak out against injustice and stand with the oppressed. This season is our response to the systematic and continuous erasure of the Palestinian people and the silencing of their stories, culture, and their history. We do this not only for Palestinians, but for our collective humanity. We are honored to be joined today by playwright Ismail Khalidi and assistant professor and director Samer Al-Saber. And I'd like to acknowledge that I've known Ismail for several years through collaborations around initiatives of the Palestinian Youth Movement, including judging and events for PYM's Ghassan Kanafani Resistance Arts Committee, which I was involved with for some time. And so the question of art in relation to Palestinian resistance is something I've had the privilege of both seeing him reflect on and practice through a direct commitment to the writing of young Arab and Palestinian youth. And it's, of course, a great pleasure to finally make the acquaintance of Samer Al-Saber. With that, I'll begin with their biographies. Born in Beirut to Palestinian parents and raised in Chicago, Ismail Khalidi is a playwright and director who has written, directed, performed, curated, and taught internationally. Khalidi's plays include Tablas, Truth Serum Blues, Foot, Returning to Haifa, and Dead Are My People. Khalidi's plays have been published in numerous anthologies. His writing on politics and culture has appeared in The Nation, Guernica, American Theater Magazine, and Remezcla. His poetry and plays have been published by Mizna, and he co-edited Inside Out, 6 plays from Palestine and the diaspora. Khalidi has received commissions from the Actors Theater of Louisville, Noor Theater, Angia World Theater, and the Public Theater, and is currently a visiting artist at Teatro Amal in Chile. He holds an MFA in dramatic writing from NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. Samer Al-Saber is an assistant professor of theater and performance studies at Stanford University. He is affiliated with the Center for the Comparative Study of Race and Ethnicity in the Abbasi Program in Islamic Studies. His work appeared in Theater Research International, All Theater, Performance Paradigm, Critical Survey, Theater Survey, Jaddalia, Counterpunch, This Week in Palestine, and various edited volumes such as Palgrave's Performing for Survival and Edinburgh Press's Being Palestinian. He is co-editor of the anthology Stories Under Occupation and Other Plays from Palestine, and editor of To the Good People of Gaza by Bloomsbury Press. Directing credits include Betty Shamier's As Soon as Impossible, Hassan Abdulrazak's The Prophet, Arthur Milner's Facts, and a Palestinian adaptation of A Midsummer Night's Dream in Arabic. Sounds amazing. As playwright, most recently in 2023, he wrote and directed Decolonizing Sara for Chicago's Uprising Theater. He is currently directing Ismail Khalidi and Naomi Wallace's adaptation of Ghassan Kanafani's Returning to Haifa for Golden Thread Productions in San Francisco. So welcome to you both, and welcome to the audiences who are joining in the Zoom room and those tuning in via HowlRound. So before we dive into our conversation, I would like to take a moment to welcome people who are joining us through these platforms And those here with us, please feel free to utilize the chat function to post your comments and questions throughout the conversation. With that, let's go ahead and get started. And so what I had in mind is to ask a series of kind of open-ended questions, getting each of you to address respectively your reflections on three broad topics. One, your feelings about the staging of this production during our particular moment in time. Two, questions pertaining to the genesis and nature of this adaptation, both in writing and staging. Three, your own reflections on Ghassan Kanafani and literature as an instrument of Palestinian anti-colonial resistance. And four, with time permitting, reflections on the nature of Arab American writing and literature, bearing in mind, of course, we have some students here as well as audience members who may want to ask their own questions. Now, with that, let's go ahead and get started. So I'd like to begin by noting just, we're seeing amazing and courageous displays of resistance from across the country as students put themselves on the line to create encampments in opposition to the latest iteration of Zionist genocide in Palestine, and calling on other institutions to cut all financial complicity with settler colonialism, genocide, and apartheid. And at my own university, San Francisco State, a coalition known as Students for Gaza and their supporters have been holding down an encampment since April 29th, and they succeeded in getting the president to come out to meet them for open bargaining to discuss their demands, which in and of itself was an important victory. And I just wanted to give that little shout out before asking each of you to reflect on the following. What is the significance for you of having this production, which again is an adaptation of Kanafani's Returning to Haifa, in the Golden Thread Theater? If you'd also like to reflect on the significance of that space. So what is the significance of having this production at the Golden Thread Theater in a moment where we're seeing bold and escalating resistance to Israel's genocide and colonial project?
Who do you want to start, Omar?
Well, I usually like to go with whoever feels most inspired, but if you feel like you're ready to jump on, go for it.
Go, Ismail, go.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. I mean, first of all, thanks, Omar, for the introduction, and great to see you, Samer, and thank you to Golden Thread for making this happen. And thanks to all of you that are tuning in. It's also, I was gonna say, listening to all our titles and our degrees and our publications, it feels, I don't know about you, Samer, but it feels so like, I don't know, all these colonial titles and accomplishments that we accrue, and it just feels like I want to change my bio to anti-colonial playwright, period. So to answer your very good question, Omar, I think it's pretty clear why it's an important moment. I mean, to have this play at Golden Thread, of course it makes sense, but it should be noted that Sahar, the AD, had made the decision early on at the beginning of this genocide to devote a whole year to plays about and by Palestinians. And it is a moment for moral clarity, and not everybody is meeting that moment with moral clarity. And so it's a testament to Golden Thread that they did so early and so decisively. And of course, as you mentioned, and as we can see, there are many people, especially young folks, that are meeting this moment with moral clarity and action. And so that kind of, in general, the idea of doing Palestinian plays at this moment in San Francisco, a major American city, of course, and a hub of culture and art, is incredibly important and symbolic and necessary and urgent. But also, I think specifically Kanafani, right? I mean, Kanafani was an internationalist. Kanafani was someone who understood and explicitly articulated the fact that the Palestinian struggle is not just about Palestinians, is that it's a struggle that encompasses and brings together and is for all oppressed people all over the place. And it very much reminds me of one of the signs. I'm in New York right now, not far from Columbia campus, that I saw at the entrance of the encampment before it was dismantled violently, which is Palestine is everywhere. And of course, that operates on two levels right now. right? Which is that Palestine is everywhere. It is, what's going on in the Congo is also a Palestine. What's going on in Sudan is also a Palestine. What's going on in the carceral state that we live in is Palestine, and in the Amazon, because it is environmental, it is political, it is about settler colonialism and white supremacy and imperialism and the war machine and all of these things, like all of these places. And of course, Palestine is also everywhere, because everywhere you go now, people are rocking keffiyehs and people are protesting and people know what's up in a way that they, and every time you open your phone or your screen, and in the most horrific, of course, images that one can conjure are things that we have been bombarded with incessantly. But I think that idea of Palestine is everywhere is something that Kanafani instinctively, intellectually, emotionally, artistically, aesthetically understood. And so yeah, I think that this moment it's a moment that is made for Kanafani, and Kanafani is made for this moment. So yeah, that's my kind of first answer, but I'll probably list here something that Samet has to say and want to add something myself. But
thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here, and it's a privilege to have the opportunity to add something to the eloquent answer you just had. For me, Golden Thread, as Ismail said, is a theater production company that did the right thing at the right time, and its artistic director had the intuition and the sense to listen to the community and the audience, particularly the Arab American and Palestinian audience, and all the allies, and to listen and understand that this is a moment where theater can allow us to be together, to feel that to love Palestine, to stand with Palestine, to be in solidarity with Palestine is something that we want to do as a community. And to give us the opportunity to experience a story that is dear to the hearts of Palestinians. I mean, I read it as a kid, and to this day, it remains a milestone in my education and in my sense of self as a Palestinian. And that is a story that repeats itself, whoever read it, it's a question. It's like, when did you read it? And it's not even how did you feel, because we know how we felt. And so that's the first thing. The idea that, yes, this is Golden Thread and Sahar listened to the community and really allowed us that space. The second thing I want to say is that this play, the adaptation that Naomi and Ismail did, and the story really drives home one big idea, along with all the other ideas, that the right of return is the unnegotiable center of everything that we are. And that center is a center that we need to remind the world of constantly and repeatedly. That the story didn't begin in October 7th. It began in 1948 and before 1948. And that the right of return is this pillar of Palestinian existence today. And to tell that story today, now at Golden Thread in San Francisco in America, is really important and an imperative to remind audiences that the right of return is where the discussion needs to be, not October 7th. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you, for those beautiful and really incisive answers. And just as a reminder for those tuning in now, this is No Summary, Golden Threads online conversations with artists who don't fit in a box. And we are here with director Samer Al-Saber and playwright Ismail Khalidi discussing the Golden Thread adaptation of Hassan Kanafani's Returning to Haifa. So for the next question, right, obviously we're at a moment of heightened backlash to any and all things related to Palestine. Even opposition to Israel's latest genocide only seems to increase on all fronts. Has this production or this play in general encountered any opposition now or over the years? And if so, would either of you want to reflect on what you feel was behind that?
Samer, do you know if maybe you can answer the like this moment and then I can step back into the past? I don't know if there's been any opposition.
The sound broke away for a second. Opposition to
Itself. The
To the
staging,
production.
sorry, yeah, to the play, basically.
Oh, yeah. Actually, historically, opposition to Palestinian theater is a complicated story. In the case of this play, I am not aware of a direct and immediate opposition. There were some disagreements that were expressed through email that the artistic director dealt with. But we have not had frank and open attacks against the play. So I can say that about this production.
Yeah.
Historically, there are stories. I don't. Do you want me to go into like Returning to Haifa, like a little bit in terms of opposition? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yes, if you have it, I think the context would be great.
Actually, there's a great story. In 1979, 1980, a theater company called Sanabel People's Theater in Jerusalem adapted Returning to Haifa. And they played the play in Cinema Al-Hamra, which is very close to the Old City. It's in East Jerusalem. And the cinema itself held 800 to 1,000 people. It was a big cinema. And so all the shows were sold out. And the company was known to have association or sympathy for Hassan Kanafani and PFLP. And the audience just came out in droves. And of interest, this production, while it was going on, while it was shown in East Jerusalem, it did not have any direct confrontation. There were too many people, basically. However, a couple weeks later, after the initial premiere, while touring, the company was basically stopped on the road between venues, and everybody was arrested and taken away. And that basically marked the end of that production and the end of that iteration of that theater company in Palestine. They wouldn't come back to a kind of active production until 1983-84. And that had to do with arrests and dismantling and so on of the theater company. So that's one example that happened to this story as a stage adaptation. Yeah.
I actually didn't know that story, Samet. Yeah, I mean, I would just add to that, you know, the kind of initial act of, and the most violent act of censorship is the actual assassination of Kanafani himself, right? I mean, that's the you know, how can you better encapsulate you know, censorship than assassination? And of course, that's been used throughout time by colonial powers, by authoritarian regimes, by fascists, etc., to silence dissent, to silence opposition, to silence resistance, is the assassination or the imprisonment or the exile of artists. And as you know, your listeners may or may not know, Hassan Kanafani was assassinated by the Israelis in Beirut in 1972 in a car bomb, along with his niece, precisely because of returning to Haifa and Men in the Sun and all of his other work and his other writings and his militancy and radicalism and vision. And of course, as you mentioned, Omar, there's no question, and we could have a whole conversation devoted to censorship around Palestine in the United States in terms of the media, in terms of kind of more broadly rather, politics and arts and culture, whether it's Hollywood or theater. And not only the censorship, it's like what's being placed in front of people in that vacuum that of silenced or ignored or censored Palestinian voices and narratives, and historically and to this day, in terms of commercial production in the United States, it has been essentially Zionist propaganda, whether it's Exodus or anyway, we could talk about things on Broadway, etc. But I won't get into, the point is, it's not only censorship, it's what false narratives, what mythologies, what absolute dehumanizing rhetoric and it is put in its place systematically, skillfully, in the news, in our movies, on our stages. And that's been a process that's been ongoing for decades now. And I would say, actually, and this is again another conversation, but I think the degree to which there's been a tolerance for this genocide among elites and in the West, and a kind of slowness to react, and this devaluation of Palestinian lives, and 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 people slaughtered, has a lot to do with that propaganda and with that mythology that's been fed to us very skillfully over the years, which essentially says these are Kabul is Gaza, is Baghdad, is whatever the city in Aladdin is, right? It's all the same shit. And these are expendable brown bodies. They're all genocidal anti-Semites and rapists and fundamentalists anyway. So they're savages, right? So I mean, all of that I think that we've been prepared and conditioned, So in terms of censorship, very briefly, this play, I would say also, like, what happens with censorship is most of the time we don't know what's being censored, right? Because there are decisions that are taken to not produce a play that happens behind closed doors without us even knowing. That it's about what plays are ignored, what playwrights are ignored, what screenplays are ignored and thrown in the trash bin, and we don't even hear about it, right? So much of it happens, and then there's these few instances where we catch a glimpse of the process of censorship. And there's several examples. The Hakawati were had a play that was going to come to New York in, I believe, the 80s, that was canceled at the public. And there's a handful of Palestinian playwrights and directors and troops that have been on the cusp of presenting something, and then it's axed at the last minute. And this play itself, Returning to Haifa, my adaptation with the great Naomi Wallace, and we should shout out to Naomi, who couldn't join us today, but is one of the great American playwrights, in my opinion. This play was actually commissioned by the Public Theater in New York. I don't know where that ringing is coming from. It was commissioned by the Public Theater in New York, and we were on the cusp of a production. And at the last minute, it was pulled, essentially because of opposition from the board, right? And it had to do with who is Hassan Kanafani, what does he represent, all these things. So there's always an excuse, there's always a reason. And we only know about it because we witnessed it and spoke out about it. But again, I think a lot of it happens behind closed doors. And as you said, Omar, we are entering a new level of censorship, which is about freedom of, which goes very directly. It's not about what plays are produced. It's about very basic questions about freedom of speech, and also about danger to people's bodies and livelihoods. And this censorship is being enacted not only by cultural institutions, but by universities, by university police departments, by local politicians, by national politicians, by city police departments, et cetera, and also legally. And so we're entering a phase where, because there's actually a panic about the fact that Palestine is everywhere, and the fact that people are really hip to the game, essentially, that backlash is getting stronger, and that censorship is getting stronger, and it's coming from all directions, and it's all hands on board for the system, as it were. And I think that, as scary as that is, especially for people getting arrested, especially for people, the other level is vigilantes, right? Which we saw at UCLA, mobs, right? Which are labeled as counter protesters, but that is a form of censorship because it's through physical intimidation and violence, right? So as scary as it is, it's also a sign that the tides are turning. I mean, a vast majority of people in this country, despite decades of propaganda, despite censorship, are clearly for a ceasefire, and are identifying what is happening as a genocide, and are making the connections not only between what our government is doing to enable and fund that genocide actively, but making the connections of how the police departments working with each other, et cetera, and how Palestine is not just about Palestine; it connects to other struggles. So, I guess the censorship is it's going to get worse. It's going to get more repressive, more violent, and also it is a sign that things are changing.
Yeah, thank you both. I think for the interests of time, I'll go ahead and kind of combine the next two questions that I had. But first, I was wondering about how the decision to undertake this adaptation began for each of you. And I know obviously it's going to look a little bit different, but what led each of you within your capacity to undertake a theatrical adaptation of Returning to Haifa? And what liberties did you take in that adaptation? And what I mean by that is, for example, when I think about especially the end of the day, I feel like the confrontation between Dov and Khaldun, for example, there's a lot of kind of like almost this kind of like demeaning sort of staging where there's like, the pointing of the finger, the invasion of personal space, and the way that the staging of that happens, or that the characters are directed to move, feels very fitting. But I'm also wondering if there's a way that, the stage directions also kind of in some ways were sort of an addition on your part in what you felt that scene would look like if it was playing out in real time. So I guess, how did the decision to adapt the story begin for you? And what, if any, liberties did you take in terms of how you brought the story to life on the stage? Oh, and before I forget, another detail I remember, and you all can let me know if I was perhaps hallucinating this, but I felt like in the kind of, the final conversation between, Said and Dov / Khaldun, there's a repeated emphasis on Palestinian in a way that I think in the text of the piece itself maybe doesn't do quite as much in the same way. So just those moments where you felt like, I'm transitioning this to a play, what that looked like, as well as what led you to take on this project in the first place.
Should I start and then Samer, or you want Samer to start?
I think it's better if you start, Ismail, because the adaptation came.
Yeah. I'll try to be quick, but I mean, it actually started many years ago, probably in 2013. Naomi and I, who have known each other for a long time, and had just started to kind of collaborate as writers. I had actually acted for her in a handful of her pieces beforehand, before I realized I was not a very good actor. And then, and that was one of the starting points of our relationship, our friendship, and our partnership, our artistic partnership. But I think we both have kind of knew of Kanafani, obviously, as a Palestinian. I knew about him, but Naomi has many connections to Palestine and to Beirut, and even to the Kanafani family. And so we decided, this was the Kanafani we wanted to work on, and went to got the blessing of the Kanafani family, of course, and just kind of the pieces fell into place from there. I mean, it should be mentioned, there was, before we started, there had several years before, there had been kind of a problematic Israeli adaptation that took many, many liberties without the approval of the Kanafani family. And so we felt that we were kind of an interesting duo to do it right, and to say, we're going to honor Kanafani in English, of course. And we said this will be an adaptation, but we wanted to do it right. So we were very careful to talk to the Kanafani family and to follow some of their guidance, or as much of their guidance as we could. And really, we made the decision early on to stay really true to the text. And so there's a lot. I mean, I gotta say, a lot of the great things in this adaptation are taken directly from the novella itself. And I'll take credit for any things that don't work are probably our own inventions. But so we did decide, make a clear decision, and I think we executed very well of staying very close to the text, with one exception, which was, for the purposes of the kind of making it more theatrical, we invented the kind of younger versions of Saeed and Safiya, because the novella itself takes place kind of in flashback. And so instead of doing a flashback with the same actors and doing that whole thing, we decided to kind of make that the thing we departed from, and really play with this idea of them being haunted by their younger selves, as opposed to flashing back per se. And as we worked, it felt right, and it felt like it gave us something about not only a haunting in that they feel like ghosts in a way, but really it felt like it represented to us something about like how trauma works in the body and the mind, right? And how that moment of rupture, of trauma, of displacement, of ethnic cleansing, right, that they experienced in 1948 froze something in them, right? And so that younger couple, the younger Saeed and Safiya, are kind of that version of them that's split off at that moment, and they're kind of there always. And so that, I think, is the one thing that we really departed from the text, and I think it really could be justified by the fact that we're adapting it for the theater, and I think it does work. But yeah, that's the shortest story. I'll pass it to Samet, I think.
I came to the play when Sahar asked me to look at some scripts that she had chosen to potentially be on their stage at Golden Thread, and she invited me to discuss with her the possibility of these scripts. And returning to Haifa seemed to be the right play for the moment. Not only is it, telling us a story that is fundamental to the Palestinian cultural experience and political experience, but also it is by playwrights who employ theatricality in a great way to communicate this novella, and allows the audience, and this adaptation allows the audience to really immerse themselves into the story in a way that maybe reading it on the page may not. And so after our discussion about these several scripts, we arrived to Returning to Haifa as the one that I would direct and that Golden Thread would produce. So my engagement with this text, with the adaptation, began sometime in December. We started rehearsal in March, and I would say uh, I didn't take liberties in the sense that the adaptation is really theatrical with the younger selves. The language is often elevated. There are all these interruptions that happen between characters. The rhythm is built into the text that Naomi and Ismail produced. And so I felt like my job was to communicate the temporal life of the play as a director. So the audience knows that we begin the evening before the trip to Haifa, and there's a negotiation of like, do we go, do we not go? And then something inside of them pushes them to go. And then they get in the car on the drive, and there are these descriptions of all these places, and all these descriptions bring out a certain feeling within them. Um, a feeling from the past, but also a feeling of pain in the present, and a feeling of missing Palestine in many ways. And then we get a big flashback scene to the Nakba and what really happened with them in that house. And that one, to me, was all about creating an environment like a painting that allows that allows the audience to really see the story as well as hear it. And then, of course, the confrontation in the play is a confrontation that is essentially the heart of this play. And in that conversation, as you noted, there's a kind of a moment where in the script, Ismail and Naomi say that Dove actually holds his face. Like there's a stage direction that says grabbing his face, or I forget the actual word, but I think it's he grabs his face or holds his face. Um, and we did it faithfully to the text. There is a moment that the actor felt compelled to do, which is to just kind of attempt to, after the holding of the face, and the father says, "You're done," and lowers his hand. He felt like he needed to be propelled further, and so he just basically puts his hand on his chest and says, "You're weak." And it was an actor-driven moment, and I thought it worked. The playwrights were very clear that their priority was, with this adaptation, for the audience to hear the words, to understand the story, and to honor Kanafani's discourse and argument. And as a result, directorially I tried my very best to highlight as opposed to kind of conceptually intervene. And so that's yeah, I didn't take many liberties. I tried my best to just highlight. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. And especially when you were, Samer, your reference for like, creating a painting or so, it really, because one of the things I was also struck by was how the set design is so in a way it's kind of minimalistic, yet it's so kind of perfectly intricate and detailed at the same time, because it seems to capture just enough of what each moment in time in the text is supposed to be, reflecting. And so I was wondering, I guess, for each of you, you know, if you had maybe an initial vision of what this should look like when you're adapting the story, and if the final product in any way kind of deviated from that, or it's basically always in line with what you felt you were going to be doing from the outset.
Hmm. Uh, can I take this one first, Ismail? Yeah. So in terms of playwriting and adapting, there's a kind of a life of the thing that you're developing from inception, which I'm sure Ismail and Naomi would be able to articulate much better than I can. From my position as a director, the director has a team of creative artists, set designer, lighting designer, sound designer, costume designer, all the actors, and everybody brings their own reading and perception and life experience and research and so on. And as a result, really the outcome is never what I would initially imagine, if I am to honor the artists I am working with the way I hope they will honor me. And so the outcome is essentially for this production is really the product of all of us as a team working on this, and everybody bringing in a little bit of them, their artistry and their experience. In terms of for example, the set, I knew, for example, that it needed to be minimalistic. That was my hunch from the beginning, and that was my desire for the beginning. It's in line with the playwright's intention. And so the question to me became, well, what does that mean, minimalist? And to me, it ended up being, if we were to move everything that was brought in or modified after 1948 by the current residents, the Polish character and her family, if we were to remove all that, we are left with fragments that remain untouched. And those fragments are the Palestinian things that these characters, Saeed and Sophia, will see when they walk in. And so what you see on the set is our imaginary of the very things that have not been changed or modified since they left their home. And that's why we have all these fragments and incompleteness. And that's why those little things are very much highlighted and intricate. And so the set designer, so that was to me what I was after. The set designer came in and he had multiple drawings of multiple versions and so on. And eventually we arrived to the thing that you saw on stage. And that process was the same with everything. What does fragmentation mean? What does remaining mean, or remains mean? And what does it mean to re-encounter these things with love and with desire for reunification, while at the same time, by the end of the play, realizing that's not the thing that we're really after and what we really want. At the end of the day, they say, what we found, dust. So the beauty and the glimmers that we see as these encounters happen, actually, by the end of the day of the encounter in Haifa, the character realized that no, actually, we're not here because of the past or our desire to recapture the past. Rather, we are here to make the future. And that's the power really of Kanafani, and the power of the adaptation as well, is that it emphasizes this. So that's my general answer to your question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add really briefly to that, is that I think that the power of a good kind of adaptation process, and the direction is a part of the adaptation, right? I mean, it's the levels of adaptation and interpretation and collaboration, and the power of a good collaboration, you know, is to be found, or the, you know, the potential, in my opinion and experience, to be found in that act of trust and letting go. And that goes from, you know, the Kanafani family saying, we trust you to do this, and trusting us to pay, you know, respect and cherish, and transmit the vision, um, as closely as possible to what Hassan intended, as we understand it. And also, you know, that trust to say, you know, we're going to do this little thing and we think it's going to work, and that goes on and on, right? From us to the director, the producer, the director, to the actors, to the designers, to everybody working, all of the workers that put their hand and their energy and their time, you know, into that interpretation, adaptation, collaboration. And I think, and of course, you know, that can backfire, you know, at any level of the chain. But, you know, if you choose right, you know, and trust from a real place, and of course, with, you know, I mean, we weren't in the space. Naomi and I didn't have the, you know, we couldn't manage, unfortunately, to be in the space, but during rehearsals and for the production. But we, you know, we had conversations, we agreed on things, we discussed things, and then we kind of and we felt comfortable. And this is not always the case, you know, letting Samer and Sahar and the whole team just fly. And, you know, it really is a beautiful thing. Just like I'm sure Samer let, you know, like he mentioned, an actor's decision, and, you know, trusting that the actor's decision is going to give us something. And that's a beautiful thing, because, you know, if I'm there, and I'm trying to control everything, you know, I might block this decision or this interpretation unwittingly. That when there is that trust, magic can happen. And so it really is, it's a beautiful thing. It can be a beautiful thing. And I find that that's been the case in all of the productions. This play has been produced 3 times: in London, in Minneapolis at Pangea World Theatre. London was at the Finborough, at Pangea World Theatre in Minneapolis, and now at Golden Thread, with 3 different directors, designers. Teams were different on each, and each production in its own way found something that I or Naomi would never have suggested or told them to do as the adapters, right? And so that, to me, is the beautiful thing, really, about theater. But also about collaboration, about working together, about struggling, you know, about struggling together, about building together, is those moments of trust and letting go.
Thank you so much. And on that note of collaboration, I'd like to actually take a moment now to open it up to see if there's any questions from folks in the audience. I know there's some of my students here, some colleagues, as well as people streaming. So we'll just take a minute and see if anyone has any questions. Feel free to unmute and ask directly if possible. Teresa?
Hi there. Thank you both so much. I'm Teresa. I teach at SF State too. I saw the play, I think it was a week ago. Is that right? It was beautiful. I was, you know, I was very moved. I was crying by the end. It's so beautifully done. I just echo everything Omar said, the way the set was designed. Yeah, I loved it. I wanted to ask, sorry, the sun's very bright. It's a beautiful day. I wanted to ask, I was just thinking about like process there, you know, Omar was asking a little bit about this, like how you engaged in the process of the creation of the adaptation, but more if you're open to sharing just about the kind of like holding the emotion of that in this moment. Like, was there a way that there was like, it was a there was something joyful about creating this really important art at this particular moment? Or was it hard to hold sometimes? And I know, like, no pressure if you don't want to share, too much personally, but I kept thinking about that as I was watching the play, thinking about what it meant to create this art at this particular moment and what that might have felt like. The way art hopefully can be something that serves us as much as it serves other people because it serves us when we create it somehow, or I don't know. Just wonder your thoughts on that. Anything?
I can talk a little bit about rehearsal. I mean, a lot of folks who may see this, now or later via streaming or via recording, may not realize that our daily environment as artists, whether we are Palestinian artists or artists who are allies for Palestine, or professors or students, there are very few of us. Like, yes, there are encampments. Yes, there are demonstrations. Yes, there is a worldwide movement. Yes to all these things. Yes to the popular belief that Palestine deserves solidarity and liberation. However, in daily life, there is a loneliness, and if you're getting a text, often it's going to be from a family member, and there is a crisis, and so to be in a rehearsal room and working on this play during this time with a cast who are either Palestinians or allies, became a place where, for me personally, I could be myself. That it is okay to talk Palestine and be fully transparent and not be afraid to say things as I believe they are, without fear and without threat of retaliation immediately, or in the future, and so on. So in a way, and I feel like the team felt that way too, that as we were working, it was an environment that we could work in without fear, for ourselves and for the people we care about. So that was a huge deal, that Golden Thread gave us that opportunity, and the fact that we gave each other that opportunity. There was a constant, updating and reminders about the news and what's happening, and in that way also realizing that you are a part of the team who understands the current moment. That was absolutely meaningful. And then finally, the story itself is a story of being kicked out of your home. It's a Nakba story. It's a return story. It's a story about resistance and the meaning of resistance and the choice of resistance and continuing the struggle in a time when a lot of Palestinians are making that choice right now and living that moment right now. And in that sense, there's a empathic dimension to the rehearsing of the play as a team, and that was also, I think, meaningful to all of us.
That's a really beautiful answer, Samer. I mean, I wasn't in the process itself, unfortunately, but I've been in similar artistic processes over the last 7 months. And I mean, first of all, I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of Palestinians in the diaspora outside of Palestine are and allies, of course. But I mean, there are days, I know a lot of people, and myself included, there are days when you do not want to get out of bed. I mean, there's a level of grief. There is a level and of rage, of heartbreak that is not normal. And of course, there's also knowing, well, I have the luxury, I have the opportunity, I have the ability to get up and go create art, and that is something I must embrace and must be grateful for, especially at this moment, and actually is an obligation. And I consider it, what we do, cultural resistance. And so in the processes, artistic processes I've been a part of collaboratively over these past 7 months, I kind of have had similar experiences to what you're talking about, Sam, in that they've been some of the few places where I've been able to cry and laugh properly over this time, precisely because they are spaces of understanding, of empathy, of solidarity, of generative resistance to this moment and reimagining of something much better and less horrific than what we are witnessing. And I felt the same way with audiences. I don't know how it's been in the theater, but I've heard people laugh in ways that I don't remember. That's been I don't remember people laughing and crying, in ways that like really like the floodgates. And I think it has less to do with the work I happen to be presenting at the moment, as opposed to like the moment that we're all in and what it means to be in a room and doing the ceremony that is creating theater. So I think there is a kind of ceremonial, cathartic, and also like generative element to the alchemy that's happening in the room, both with and without an audience at this moment, especially.
Thank you both so much for those very honest answers, trusting us with your own feelings and just kind of processes. I think that means a lot. Well, we're basically at the last minute, so in some ways I feel like the conversation has just gotten started, but kind of respecting time, I'd like to go ahead and just see if either of you have any final thoughts or words you'd like to leave us with before we formally conclude.
Samer, do you have anything?
The only thing I'll say is to love Palestine is a great thing. To be an ally with Palestine is a great thing. So if somebody is listening or seeing, thank you if that's how you feel.
Yeah, I just want to thank again you, Omar, of course, for the questions, for moderating, for being part of making this happen. Thanking Golden Thread and you, Samet, and the whole creative team, all the people who worked on this behind the scenes, on the stage, backstage. And we need more and more of this, and this moment of, I hope this moment of solidarity and uprising and connecting struggles continues and grows and evolves. And I just want to read one little thing from the play, but it's from Kanathan. It's from Returning to Haifa, the original. And it's just seems so pertinent to this moment. And he says, Saeed says to Dove, he says, one day you'll realize that the greatest crime any human being can commit is to believe, even for one moment, that the weakness or mistakes of others gives him the right to exist at their expense. And there's something about that sentence that feels like it goes to the heart of what we're witnessing. It goes to the heart of this kind of complex matrix of injustice and dehumanization and destruction that is being unleashed, not only in Gaza but in other places, is that feeling by those doing the destroying that they have the right to exist at the expense of others. Anyway, so I would just like to shout out to Kanafani for being one of those visionaries who captured the moment he lived in so well, and also created these, such a brilliant guide for every moment of struggle and kind of got to the core of human liberation and resistance in such a beautiful way. So just a shout out to him.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So on that note, we've come to the end of the conversation. First and foremost, would like to thank again Ismail Khalidi and Samer Al-Saber. I'd like to thank HowlRound for hosting the program. And as a reminder, all No Summary episodes live on Golden Thread's YouTube channel and HowlRound's website. Thank you to Wendy Reyes, our live stream technician, and to the rest of Golden Thread's team, Sahar, Michelle, Shayla, Linda, and Suluna. And a big thank you to all of you who tuned in today. Join the Golden Thread email list to stay on top of programs and events. Take care. Thank you for now. And hopefully this is only the start of a series of engaging conversations.